somewhere deep in the Amazon basin, beneath a canopy so thick that sunlight arrives in thin, broken shafts, like light through cathedral glass, the jungle keeps a secret. It has kept it for 500 years, maybe longer. The Amazon rainforest is the largest tropical forest on Earth. It covers more than 5.5 million square kilometers across 9 countries. It is home to 1 in 10 of all species known to science. Its rivers carry more fresh water than any other river system on the planet. For centuries, Western explorers looked at it and saw chaos of beautiful, terrifying, impenetrable chaos. A green wall with no door. But what if they were wrong? What if, beneath the roots and the mud and the millennia of fallen leaves, there are roads? What if beneath the vine-strangled earth, there are plazas and causeways and the foundations of buildings that once housed tens of thousands of people, an entire civilization so advanced, so organized, so unexpected that even today, after decades of discovery, archaeologists are still struggling to fully believe what the evidence is showing them. In 2009, a satellite passed over a remote region of the Brazilian state of Mato Grosso. Its instruments were not looking for lost cities, they were mapping deforestation. But when researchers examined the resulting data, they saw something that had no business being there, of geometric shapes, perfect circles, precise squares. Straight lines cutting through the jungle with the kind of accuracy that nature simply does not produce on its own. There were hundreds of them. They stretched across an area roughly the size of Great Britain. They had been there all along, hidden in plain sight, buried under the soil and the centuries, and they were only the beginning. This is the story of the lost cities of the Amazon, a civilization that was not supposed to exist, that every expert of the last 500 years insisted could not exist, and that the jungle itself tried to erase. It is a story about what happens when the evidence refuses to cooperate with the theory. It is a story about explorers who were dismissed as fantasists, about scientists who changed their minds, and about an entire chapter of human history that we very nearly lost forever. Stay with us, because the deeper we go into the jungle, the stranger and the more extraordinary this story becomes. To understand what was lost in the Amazon, we first need to understand the world into which it was lost, and then stripped from memory. Go back approximately 3,000 years. Across the Americas, civilizations are rising. The Olmec are constructing colossal stone heads along the Gulf Coast of Mexico. In Peru, the ancestors of the Inca are beginning to organize the Andean highlands. And in the vast basin of the Amazon River, something else is happening, something that leaves a very different kind of trace. The Amazon River itself is the engine of everything. It begins in the Andes Mountains of Peru, less than 200 kilometers from the Pacific coast, and it travels nearly 7,000 kilometers before emptying into the Atlantic Ocean. Along the way, it collects the waters of more than 1,000 tributaries. During the wet season, the river and its branches flood an area larger than France, creating a temporary inland sea that covers the forest floor and connects communities that would otherwise be separated by impassable terrain. This seasonality was not a problem for the Amazon's ancient inhabitants. It was an opportunity. They built their societies around it. During the dry season, they farmed the fertile floodplains called varzias, the rich alluvial soils left behind as the waters retreated. During the wet season, they traveled by canoe along waterways that connected their settlements into networks of exchange, communication, and governance. The societies that emerged from this rhythm were not the nomadic hunter-gatherers that Western scholars long assumed. They were sedentary. They were hierarchical. They had chiefs, and those chiefs had armies, and those armies sometimes clashed in wars that were recorded briefly, breathlessly by the first European observers, before epidemic disease swept those observers' informants away forever. And they built things. they built things on a scale that is only now becoming fully visible. In the upper Xingu region of what is today Brazil's Mato Grosso state, archaeologists have found the remains of a planned urban network, not one city, but a cluster of connected settlements arranged around a central hub, linked by roads and canals, covering an area of roughly 50,000 square kilometers. This is larger than Portugal. In the Brazilian state of Acre, near the border with Bolivia, researchers have documented more than 400 geometric earthworks, massive enclosures made of ditches and banks, arranged in circles, squares, and octagons with extraordinary precision. Some of these structures are 300 meters across. Many are aligned to astronomical phenomena, the rising of the sun at the solstice, the path of the moon. These are not the works of people living hand to mouth in a difficult environment. These are the works of engineers. And beneath the soil of the entire Amazon basin, there is something that may be the most extraordinary legacy of all, something that the jungle's ancient inhabitants created deliberately over generations. Something that turned poor tropical soil into one of the most fertile substances on Earth. They called it, in modern scientific literature, terra preta, dark earth, and its existence alone proves that everything we thought we knew about the Amazon was wrong. But to understand terra preta and what it tells us about the civilization that made it, we need to go back to a specific moment, a specific encounter that started the clock on 5 centuries of forgetting. The year is 1541. A Spanish soldier and explorer named Francisco de Orellana sets out from the Andes on what is intended to be a modest reconnaissance mission. He is meant to find food for a larger expedition led by Gonzalo Pizarro, the half-brother of the man who conquered the Inca. He is meant to be gone a few weeks. He will not return for 2 years. And when he does, he will have become the first European to have crossed the entire length of the Amazon River, roughly the distance from London to Kabul. With him is a Dominican friar named Gaspar de Carvajal, who keeps a detailed journal of the journey. It is this journal that gives us our earliest written record of what the Amazon looked like before the catastrophe that was coming before the diseases that European contact would unleash, before the populations it would destroy. Carvajal's account is remarkable. As Orellana's small flotilla drifted down the great river, the friar described seeing, from the water, large cities lining the riverbanks. He wrote of roads leading into the interior. He described a village that took them an entire day to pass a continuous settlement stretching for miles along the water's edge, so densely populated that the boat's approach was met with the sound of drums, and war canoes swarmed out to intercept them. He wrote of one settlement with plazas and sculpted roads leading into a countryside so well maintained it looked, to his European eyes, like the parklands of Spain. He described a population that he estimated in the millions. For centuries, historians dismissed Carvajal's account as fantasy, propaganda, some said, a tale inflated to justify the expedition's hardships, to make heroes of the survivors. The Amazon they found when they went looking for these cities was empty. There was nothing there. Carvajal had been delirious, with fever, and had invented it all. But here is the detail that should have given them pause. Carvajal described the soil around the settlements as black and rich. He described gardens growing in it that were lush and productive in a way that other jungle soils were not. He was describing terra preta, and terra preta is very, very real. When the second wave of European explorers arrived in the Amazon 50 years, 100 years after Orellana, they found not the thriving civilization Carvajal had described, but something far more haunting. They found ruins overgrown with jungle. They found earthworks that no living person could explain. They found populations devastated to a fraction of what had once existed. And they found in the soil patches of this remarkable dark earth, fertile, rich, and ancient scattered across the basin like the fingerprints of a vanished world. What had happened? The answer is one of the most catastrophic demographic events in human history. When Europeans made contact with the Americas, they brought with them diseases to which the indigenous populations had no immunity. Smallpox, measles, influenza. These spread far faster than the Europeans themselves, racing ahead of the explorers through trading networks and river routes, killing people who had never seen a European face. Estimates suggest that within a century of first contact, between 50 and 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas had died. In the Amazon, the effect was particularly complete, because the Amazon's sophisticated, interconnected civilization depended on dense, settled populations. When those populations collapsed, the cities were abandoned. The fields went unfarmed. The roads were swallowed by vegetation. Within a generation or two, the jungle had reclaimed everything. And the survivors, few, scattered, and often displaced from their homelands, had no way to communicate the scale of what had been lost to the Europeans who came after. By the 18th and 19th centuries, when Western scholars began seriously studying the Amazon, the forest had been growing over the ruins for 150 years. There was nothing visible. And so, fitting the silence to the only theory available, they concluded that there had never been anything there at all. It was a catastrophic mistake. And it would take a very specific, very unlikely discovery to begin correcting it. The story of how the lost cities of the Amazon were rediscovered is, in many ways, the story of one extraordinary substance and the researchers stubborn enough to take it seriously. Terra preta, Portuguese for dark earth, is a type of highly fertile anthropogenic soil, meaning it was created by human activity rather than by natural processes. It is found in patches scattered across the Amazon basin, sometimes covering areas of several hectares, sometimes much larger. It is dark, almost black, in contrast to the surrounding reddish-orange tropical soil. It contains high concentrations of charcoal, bone fragments, pottery shards, and organic matter. And unlike ordinary tropical soils, which are exhausted within a few years of farming, Terra preta retains its fertility for centuries, perhaps millennia. Even today, it is prized by local farmers who dig it up and sell it as a premium growing medium. Western scientists first began to document terra preta systematically in the 19th century. But for a long time, it was treated as a curiosity rather than a clue. It was not until the 1960s and 1970s that a Dutch soil scientist named Wim Sombroek began arguing forcefully and often against considerable resistance that terra preta was not a natural phenomenon. It was manufactured. Ancient Amazonian people had deliberately created it by incorporating charcoal produced by low-temperature burning into the soil over generations, along with organic waste and biological material. Sombroek's argument had a radical implication. If people had deliberately created these fertile soils, they must have been planning for the future. They must have been thinking in terms of long-term settlement, not the shifting temporary camps that conventional wisdom assigned to Amazonian peoples. They were farming permanently, on a large scale. And if they were farming permanently, they could support large, dense, sedentary populations. And if they could support large, dense, sedentary populations, they could build cities. The patches of terra preta, Sombroek argued, were not random. They were the footprints of settlements, the places where people had lived for generations and enriched the soil as a byproduct of their daily lives. Wherever you found a significant concentration of terra preta, you were standing, quite probably, on the site of an ancient Amazonian community. Map the terra preta, and you map the lost civilization. In the 1990s and early 2000s, a new generation of archaeologists began doing exactly that. Researchers like Anna Roosevelt, Eduardo Neves, and Michael Heckenberger conducted excavations at sites across the basin. What they found consistently exceeded their expectations. at the confluence of the Tapajos and Amazon rivers near the modern town of Santarém. Roosevelt found evidence of a complex chiefdom with a population she estimated in the tens of thousands, existing as far back as 3,000 years ago. At sites along the Rio Negro, Neves found stratified deposits of ceramics and charcoal, spanning thousands of years of continuous occupation. But it was Michael Heckenberger's work in the Upper Xingu region that produced perhaps the most dramatic findings of this era that forced a complete rethinking of Amazonian prehistory. Heckenberger had been working with the Kwikuro people, an indigenous community of the Upper Xingu, since the early 1990s. The Kwikuro had oral traditions that spoke of their ancestors as great builders of towns, of roads, of a network of communities that had once covered the landscape. Mainstream archaeology had largely set these traditions aside, but Heckenberger took them seriously enough to look. What he found, working with Kwikuro guides through terrain that outside researchers rarely entered, was staggering. Beneath the forest, the earthworks of an ancient urban network were still clearly visible once you knew what to look for. There were raised causeways connecting villages. There were circular plazas. There were defensive ditches and moats surrounding settlements. And there were mounds, deliberate earthen platforms on which buildings had once stood arranged in patterns that reflected a sophisticated understanding of urban planning. In 2008, Heckenberger published his findings in the journal Science. He and his colleagues had documented a network of at least 19 settlements in the Upper Xingu region, connected by roads and spread across approximately 50,000 square kilometers. At its height, around the year 1250 to 1500 CE, this network may have housed as many as 50,000 people. The scientific community was stunned, but the truly revolutionary discoveries were still to come, and they would arrive not from the ground, but from the sky. For most of human history, finding buried ruins required digging. You had to know roughly where to look, you had to have the resources to excavate, and you had to be lucky. In a jungle as vast and impenetrable as the Amazon, this approach could, in theory, take centuries. It had already taken centuries, and we had barely scratched the surface. Then came LiDAR. LiDAR stands for Light Detection and Ranging. It works by firing rapid pulses of laser light from an aircraft down toward the ground and measuring precisely how long each pulse takes to return. By firing millions of pulses per second, the system can build a three-dimensional map of everything the laser touches, including the ground surface beneath the vegetation, because the laser pulses that pass through gaps in the forest canopy bounce off the ground and come back up with their timing data intact. The result is a digital model of the terrain stripped bare of trees and vegetation, a ghost landscape in which every earthwork, every mound, every ditch and bank and road becomes clearly visible. When researchers began applying LiDAR to the Amazon, it was as if someone had suddenly switched on the lights in a room that had been dark for 500 years. In 2018, a major LiDAR survey published in the journal Nature revealed the remains of a dense urban settlement in the Llanos de Mojos region of Bolivia, an area of tropical savanna adjacent to the Amazon basin. The survey, led by Heiko Prumers and Carla Jaimes Betancourt of the German Archaeological Institute, documented the remains of what they called a lost urbanism of the Casarabe culture, which flourished between approximately 500 and 1400 CE. What the LiDAR showed was breathtaking. Across a survey area of roughly 4,500 square kilometers, the researchers mapped 26 sites, but 2 of them were of a scale that no one had anticipated. One site, which the team called Kotoka, covered roughly 150 hectares and featured a stepped platform mound rising nearly 20 meters above the surrounding plain, surrounded by U-shaped structures, rectangular platform mounds, and an intricate system of canals and causeways. Another site, called Landivar, was even larger. These were not villages. These were cities. More than that, they were part of a planned urban system. The causeways connecting sites were not random. They formed a geometric network with the largest sites at the nodes and smaller settlements arrayed around them. The system was hierarchical and organized, consistent with a complex political structure that could coordinate construction on a massive scale over a large area. The Kasarabe culture had been known to archaeologists, but only vaguely a few ceramic fragments, some scattered earthworks that no one had fully mapped. The LiDAR survey transformed them in an instant from an obscure footnote into one of the most significant pre-Columbian civilizations ever documented. But Bolivia was only one part of the picture. In Brazil, parallel work was revealing an equally dramatic story. In the state of Acre, in the westernmost reaches of Brazil near the Bolivian and Peruvian borders, a series of LiDAR surveys conducted between 2010 and 2018 revealed more than 400 geometric earthworks, the ditched enclosures that researchers call geoglyphs. These structures, most of them hidden under forest, had been invisible to researchers working on foot, but from above, they were unmistakable. The geoglyphs of Acre are extraordinary structures. They are large, some measure 300 meters across. They are precise. Their geometric forms, circles, squares, and complex polygons show a sophisticated understanding of spatial planning. They are old radiocarbon dating places, their construction between roughly 1000 BCE and 1500 CE, with some potentially older. And they are numerous. The distribution of known geoglyphs suggests that the Acre region may contain as many as 1,000 of them in total. What were they for? This is where the evidence opens into genuine mystery and where the scientific debate becomes especially rich. Some researchers believe the geoglyphs served as ceremonial gathering places, large enclosed spaces where communities came together for ritual activities, seasonal festivals, or political meetings. The fact that excavations inside the enclosures have found very little pottery or organic refuse suggests they were not permanently occupied, lending some weight to this interpretation. Others argue that the enclosures had a defensive function, protecting communities during periods of conflict. Still others suggest astronomical alignment, like Stonehenge. Many of the geoglyphs appear to be oriented toward significant solar and lunar events. The honest answer is probably all of these things, at different times and for different peoples. What the geoglyphs undeniably demonstrate is that whoever built them was organized, numerous, and possessed of a sophisticated cultural life. These are not the traces of isolated family groups struggling to survive. These are the marks of a civilization. And the soil beneath them? Terra preta. Of course. Let us spend a moment with the most extraordinary evidence of all, because terra preta is not just a clue to the past. It may be one of the most important agricultural discoveries in human history, and the fact that we are only now beginning to understand it tells you something profound about how completely this civilization was erased. To appreciate what the ancient Amazonians achieved with terra preta, you first need to understand the problem they were solving. Tropical soils are, paradoxically, very poor agricultural soils, despite being covered with spectacularly lush vegetation. The reason is that the nutrients in a tropical ecosystem are not stored in the soil, they are stored in the living organisms themselves. When a leaf falls in the Amazon, it is decomposed and its nutrients are recycled into the living system within weeks. The soil beneath is essentially just a medium for roots, not a reservoir of fertility. When you clear the vegetation and farm the exposed soil, the nutrients are gone almost immediately. Within 2 or 3 years, the land is exhausted and must be abandoned. This is why traditional slash-and-burn agriculture in the Amazon requires constant movement. You farm a patch, exhaust it, move on, and wait decades for the forest to regenerate and rebuild the nutrient cycle. This is why mainstream scholars concluded that permanent, large-scale agriculture in the Amazon was impossible. The ancient Amazonians found a way around this. They created their own soil. By burning organic material wood, plant waste, animal bones at low temperatures, without full combustion, They produced a substance called biochar, a highly stable form of carbon that does not decompose rapidly. They mixed this biochar into the soil along with organic waste, kitchen scraps, food remains, ceramic fragments, bone, and, over time, they built up a layer of extraordinarily fertile, stable growing medium that retained nutrients rather than leaching them away. The resulting terra preta is, in agricultural terms, almost miraculous. It has 4 times the organic carbon of surrounding soils. It retains 5 times more phosphorus, a key plant nutrient. It supports a microbial community that actively continues to build fertility over time, which is why ancient terra preta is still remarkably fertile today, centuries after the people who made it are gone. Carbon dating of the oldest terra preta deposits has produced results that stagger the imagination. Some patches appear to have been in continuous use for 3,000 years. In a few locations, the terra preta layer is 2 meters deep, the accumulated soil management of dozens of generations, piled one on top of another. Think about what this means. For 3,000 years, generation after generation of Amazonian people deliberately enriched and maintained their agricultural land. This is not the behavior of nomads. This is the behavior of people who expected to be in the same place for a very long time and who were planning for grandchildren and great-grandchildren they would never meet. The scale is also remarkable. Conservative estimates suggest that approximately 10% of the Amazon basin contains significant deposits of terra preta, an area of roughly 500,000 square kilometers. That is larger than the combined land area of Germany, France, and Spain. Wim Sombroek, the soil scientist who spent his career arguing for the importance of terra preta, died in 2003, just as the discoveries that vindicated him were beginning to accelerate. He never saw the LiDAR images of the cities that his beloved dark earth had nourished. But it is difficult to read the story of his persistence in the face of institutional dismissal without a sense that the civilization he studied would have recognized something of itself in him. There is one more dimension to the terra preta story that deserves attention, because it connects the ancient past to a very urgent present. Modern scientists have been studying terra preta intensively, trying to understand and replicate its properties, because the technology it represents, the deliberate creation of stable, fertile, carbon-rich soil, is potentially transformative for both sustainable agriculture and carbon sequestration. The ancient Amazonians, entirely by accident of geography and ingenuity, invented a technique that could help mitigate climate change. The people who built the lost cities of the Amazon are gone, but the soil they made is still feeding people today, and it may yet feed the future. The question of who built the cities, roads, and geoglyphs of the Amazon is not simply one question. It is dozens of interlocking questions, each with its own body of evidence and its own set of competing answers. Let us work through the major theories, giving each its due and being clear, as the evidence demands, about where certainty ends and interpretation begins. Theory 1. A single, unified Amazonian civilization. The most dramatic interpretation of the accumulated evidence is that the Amazon was home to a single, broadly unified civilization, not a patchwork of isolated tribes, but an integrated cultural and political world comparable in complexity, if not in architectural style, to the great civilizations of Mesoamerica or the Andes. The evidence in favor of this view is compelling. The geoglyphs of Acre and the urban networks of the Upper Xingu and the Llanos de Mojos all share certain features: geometric precision, sophisticated earthwork engineering, evidence of long-term soil management, and trade goods that moved hundreds of kilometers from their points of origin, suggesting regular, organized exchange. The proponents of this view, most prominently the archaeologist Ana Roosevelt, and more recently, the Brazilian researcher Eduardo Neves, argue that the similarities across such a vast area are too consistent to be coincidental. They point to the distribution of specific ceramic styles across hundreds of kilometers as evidence of cultural exchange networks. They argue that the scale of the earthworks, particularly in Acre, where the geoglyphs extend across an area far too large to have been coordinated by any single community, implies a degree of political organization above the village level. The weaknesses of this theory lie precisely in its sweep. Critics note that similarity does not imply unity. Similar environments and similar agricultural challenges might independently produce similar solutions in different places. The Amazon is a big place, and assuming that all its major archaeological sites are connected by a single political or cultural system may impose a tidiness on the past that the past did not actually possess. Theory 2. A network of independent chiefdoms. The more cautious interpretation, and the one that currently commands the broadest consensus among professional archaeologists, is that the Amazon was home to numerous complex chiefdoms, politically independent but culturally related societies that traded with each other, fought with each other, and influenced each other's development over time. This model fits what the evidence actually shows at individual sites. At the Upper Xingu network, documented by Michael Heckenberger, the 17 to 19 settlements he mapped appear to form a coherent political unit, but one that is clearly distinct from other Amazonian archaeological cultures in its specific features and ceramic traditions. The Casarabe culture of the Llanos de Mojos is similarly distinct. The builders of the Acre geoglyphs are distinct from both. What we seem to be looking at under this interpretation is something analogous to the world of ancient Greece. Not one empire, but a landscape of interconnected city-states, each with its own political character, sharing a broad cultural heritage but fundamentally independent. This model has the virtue of matching what the earliest Spanish explorers actually described. Carvajal and others consistently wrote of multiple, sometimes rival chiefdoms along the river, not a single unified kingdom. The chiefs they encountered were powerful locally, but their authority was not absolute or continent-wide. Theory 3. The Amazonian Corridor, Connections to the Andes. A third, and increasingly well-supported theory concerns the relationship between Amazonian civilizations and the better-known civilizations of the Andes. For decades, scholars debated which direction cultural influence had flowed. Had Andean civilization influenced the Amazon, or had the Amazon influenced the Andes? The evidence now strongly suggests that the relationship was bidirectional and long-standing. Obsidian, a volcanic glass used for cutting tools, which occurs naturally only in Andean geological formations, has been found at Amazonian archaeological sites hundreds of kilometers from its source. Conversely, Amazonian ceramic traditions show influences that appear to have moved from the forest toward the mountains. This matters enormously for our understanding of both regions. It suggests that the Amazon was not a backwater receiving cultural trickle-down from the Andes, but an active participant in an ancient network of exchange that connected the highlands and the lowlands across thousands of kilometers. Some researchers have gone further, arguing that the Amazon was not merely connected to Andean civilization, but was, in some respects, its agricultural foundation, that the crops and farming techniques that made the great Andean empires possible originated in the Bidar, Amazonian lowlands. This remains controversial, but the evidence for robust highlands-lowlands exchange is solid enough that virtually all researchers now accept it. Theory 4. The myth and the reality of El Dorado. We cannot discuss theories about Amazonian civilization without confronting El Dorado, perhaps the most famous and most persistently misunderstood story in the history of exploration. The legend of El Dorado the Gilded Man originated with a specific ritual practice of the Muisca people of Colombia who had nothing to do with the Amazon. The Muisca chief, at his inauguration, was coated in gold dust and paddled on a raft into a sacred lake, where he threw gold and emeralds into the water as offerings to the gods. This ritual was real and is well documented. But as the story passed through Spanish hands, it mutated. El Dorado became not a man, but a place, a city of gold somewhere in the interior of South America. Generations of explorers bankrupted themselves and their patrons and lost thousands of lives searching for it. They never found it because, in the literal sense, it did not exist. And yet, there is an uncomfortable irony here. The civilization they were looking for existed. Not a city of gold, but cities of earth, wood, and ceramic that, in their complexity and scale, rivaled anything the conquistadors might have imagined. The explorers passed within miles of these cities and did not recognize them because they were looking for something that gleamed, and what was actually there was something that grew. The most responsible scholarly position on El Dorado today is this: the legend was a distortion and an inflation of something real. There were great cities in the Amazon. There were powerful chiefs who controlled enormous territories and accumulated significant wealth in the form of exotic trade goods. But the gold-paved streets of legend were a fantasy. The truth, a civilization that transformed the very soil of one of the world's largest ecosystems, is arguably more impressive. The cities are compelling. The geoglyphs are extraordinary. The Terra Preta is genuinely revolutionary. But behind all of these things are people, human beings, who were born and grew old and raised children in a world that is now almost entirely gone. What do we know about them? The answer, unfortunately, is not as much as we would like. The Amazon's heat and humidity are hostile to the preservation of organic materials. Wooden structures rot, textiles decompose. Even bone survives only under specific conditions. What survives is stone, and stone was not the Amazonian builders' primary material, and ceramic, and of course, the earth itself. But from these fragments, some things can be reconstructed. The people of the ancient Amazon were skilled ceramicists. Their pottery traditions are among the most technically sophisticated in the pre-Columbian Americas. The Marahuara culture, which flourished on the island of Marajo at the mouth of the Amazon from roughly 400 to 1400 CE, produced ceramics of extraordinary complexity, large burial urns decorated with intricate geometric designs and anthropomorphic figures, made using techniques that took generations to master and required specialized knowledge to produce. These ceramics tell us that Marahuara society was stratified. Different individuals received different burial treatments, with the most elaborate ceramics reserved for high-status individuals. There was an elite. There was a hierarchy. The ceramics also tell us about trade. Specific clay compositions and decorative styles allow archaeologists to trace the movement of ceramic goods across the basin, and what they find is a web of exchange that connects communities hundreds of kilometers apart. Rare raw materials, obsidian, certain pigments, exotic shell appear at sites far from their geological origin, carried there by networks of traders who traveled the rivers between settlements. The architecture tells us about engineering capacity. The construction of the large geoglyphs of Acre would have required the organized labor of thousands of people over extended periods. The raised causeways of the Llanos de Mojos, some of which stretch for tens of kilometers across seasonally flooded savannas, required not just labor, but sophisticated hydrological understanding. The builders had to know how water moved across their landscape and design their earthworks to manage that movement. The fish weirs elaborate systems of wooden stakes and traps placed across rivers and streams to channel and catch fish that have been found preserved in anaerobic river mud at some Amazonian sites, reveal another dimension of this civilization's technological sophistication. Some of these weir systems are enormous, hundreds of meters long, clearly capable of providing large quantities of protein to dense, settled populations. And DNA evidence, while still in its early stages, is beginning to reveal unexpected connections. A landmark 2021 study published in Nature examined ancient DNA from dozens of Amazonian archaeological sites and found evidence of population movements and admixture events that are still being interpreted. One surprising finding was evidence of genetic connections between some ancient Amazonian populations and the indigenous people of Australia and New Guinea, a signal that is not yet fully understood. But that suggests the peopling of the Amazon may have been more complex and earlier than previous models assumed. Perhaps the most poignant source of knowledge about these vanished people is the ones who did not entirely vanish. The indigenous communities of the Amazon today, while reduced in number and in many cases displaced from their traditional territories, are the descendants of the ancient builders. Their oral traditions, their agricultural knowledge, their understanding of the forest, and their ceramic and earthwork traditions represent a living thread connecting the present to the pre-Columbian past. Researchers like Michael Heckenberger have emphasized the extraordinary value of working with indigenous communities not just as informants, but as intellectual partners, because they carry knowledge that no amount of excavation can fully recover. The Quícoro people's descriptions of their ancestors as great builders were not myth, they were memory. By the time Francisco de Orellana drifted down the Amazon in 1541, the collapse had already begun. But the full scale of what was happening would not be apparent to European observers for generations, partly because it happened so fast, and partly because they were too busy causing it to fully understand it. The timing is critical. The first confirmed European contact with coastal South America occurred in 1500, when the Portuguese explorer Pedro Álvares Cabral landed in what is now Brazil. Within decades, Portuguese and Spanish settlements were established along the coast, and trade and disease began moving inland along indigenous trade networks that were already well established. Epidemic disease did not wait for Europeans to physically arrive somewhere before it struck. It could travel along existing trade routes carried by people who did not yet know they were infected. Smallpox, in particular, was catastrophically lethal in populations with no prior exposure and therefore no immune history. Modern epidemiological models suggest that epidemic waves could have swept through connected population networks with terrifying speed, potentially reaching deep into the Amazonian interior within decades of first coastal contact. Carvajal's account of 1541 describes a populated Amazon, but by then, a significant proportion of the population may already have died. The cities he saw lining the riverbanks may have been already somewhat diminished from their peak. What he saw may have been the last moment before the final collapse, rather than a civilization at its height. Within a century of sustained European contact, the demographic catastrophe was complete. Populations that had been counted in the millions were reduced to the tens of thousands. The political systems that had organized large-scale construction collapsed when the leaders died, and the populations shrank below the threshold needed to sustain complex governance. The cities were abandoned. The fields went to seed. The forest, always patient, always hungry, moved back in. This process of reclamation happened with astonishing speed. In the tropics, a cleared field can become dense secondary forest within a decade. Within a generation, the outline of a building is invisible. Within a century, a city can disappear so completely that people walking through the forest above it have no idea it is there. There is a bitter irony in this timeline. The same interconnected trade networks that had made Amazonian civilization possible, the river routes, and long-distance exchange systems that linked settlements across the basin became the vectors for the diseases that destroyed it. The very infrastructure of commerce and communication that a complex civilization requires became the mechanism of its annihilation. There is a second irony, perhaps even more bitter. The collapse of Amazonian civilization had a measurable effect on global climate. When the Amazonian population collapsed, the vast areas of cultivated land they had maintained were abandoned and began reverting to forest. Millions of hectares of cleared and managed land were reforested within decades. The resulting uptake of carbon dioxide by the new forest growth was significant enough. Some researchers have argued to have contributed to a period of global cooling in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, sometimes called the Little Ice Age. The death of the Amazon's people may have cooled the planet. The evidence for this is contested. Some researchers argue the effect was not large enough to have had a major climatic impact, while others maintain the signal is clearly visible in ice core records. The debate continues. But even the possibility raises profound questions about the relationship between human civilization and the global climate system, questions that resonate with uncomfortable force in our own century. We are living in the golden age of Amazonian archaeology. The pace of discovery in the past decade has been so rapid that textbooks written 10 years ago are already significantly out of date. New technologies, new interdisciplinary collaborations, and crucially, a new willingness to take indigenous oral traditions seriously as sources of historical knowledge are transforming our picture of the pre-Columbian Amazon. LiDAR, as we have seen, has been the transformative technology, but it is worth emphasizing just how much remains to be done. To date, LiDAR surveys have covered a relatively small fraction of the total Amazon basin. Most of the forest has never been scanned. Researchers estimate conservatively that the sites already documented represent a small fraction of what is waiting to be found. The Archaeological Institute of the Americas has suggested that we may have found, so far, perhaps 5 to 10% of the Amazonian urban sites that actually exist. If that estimate is even approximately correct, the discoveries of the next decade will be staggering. One of the most active research frontiers is the relationship between the geoglyphs of Acre and the forest that surrounds them. A major study published in 2017 by researchers from the Brazilian National Institute for Space Research and the University of Exeter found something remarkable. On the the forest growing within and around the Acre geoglyphs is compositionally different from the surrounding forest. It contains a much higher proportion of tree species that produce food, nuts, fruits, and other edibles than the surrounding vegetation. This is not random. The ancient builders of the geoglyphs appear to have actively managed the forests around their settlements, cultivating useful species and creating what researchers call forest gardens. This finding has fundamentally changed how researchers think about the relationship between indigenous peoples and the Amazon forest. The forest, or at least significant portions of it, may not be the pristine wilderness it appears to be. It may be, to a significant degree, a garden the product of millennia of deliberate cultivation and management by the people who lived in it. The implications of this for conservation are profound. If the biodiversity of the Amazon is partly the product of human management, then the expulsion or relocation of indigenous communities from their territories, which has been policy in many regions, may actually reduce that biodiversity rather than protect it. The best custodians of the Amazon, this research suggests, may be the descendants of the people who shaped it. DNA analysis is another rapidly advancing frontier. Ancient DNA, extracted from human remains at archaeological sites, is providing information about population origins, movements, and relationships that would otherwise be inaccessible. A growing body of genetic evidence suggests that the Amazon was settled multiple times by populations with different genetic signatures, and that the history of population movement within the basin was considerably more complex than previously assumed. One particularly intriguing finding, mentioned earlier, concerns the genetic connections between some ancient Amazonian populations and Australian and New Guinean indigenous peoples. This signal, first detected in 2015 and subsequently confirmed by additional analysis, suggests that one of the original founding populations of the Americas, the group that eventually gave rise to some Amazonian peoples, was genetically distinct from the Siberian ancestors who populated most of the rest of the mines continent and had connections to populations in Oceania. The mechanism by which this occurred, whether through a separate migration route from Asia or through some other process, is not yet understood, and the finding remains one of the most actively debated puzzles in the study of ancient human migration. Ground-penetrating radar, a technology that can detect subsurface features without excavation, by bouncing radar pulses off underground structures and measuring the reflections, is beginning to be used systematically in the Amazon. At a number of sites, it has revealed features that LiDAR cannot see: buried walls, underground chambers, and the foundations of structures that have left no surface trace. At one site, in the Llanos de Mojos, GPR surveys have suggested the existence of a complex system of underground water management, a buried infrastructure of channels and reservoirs that would have allowed the Casarabe people to manage water during both the wet and dry seasons with considerable sophistication. Meanwhile, work on plant genetics is revealing the extent to which the Amazon's ancient peoples shaped the ecology of the forest through the deliberate cultivation and spread of domesticated species. Many of the plants that are now considered iconic components of the Amazon ecosystem, including the Brazil nut tree, which cannot regenerate without human intervention in its seed dispersal, appear to have been actively cultivated and spread by ancient Amazonian populations. The distribution of these species across the basin maps, in many cases, onto the distribution of archaeological sites and terra preta deposits. The ancient Amazonians did not just farm the land, they shaped the forest itself. For all the extraordinary discoveries of the past 30 years, the Amazon still keeps its deepest secrets. There are questions that the evidence, as of now, cannot fully answer. And in some ways, these unanswered questions are as important as the answers we have found because they tell us where the frontier of knowledge currently runs. The most fundamental unanswered question is also the most obvious. How many people actually lived in the pre-Columbian Amazon? Estimates vary enormously, and the variation reflects genuine uncertainty rather than scholarly disagreement. At the low end, some researchers suggest a pre-contact population of around 2 million people for the entire basin. At the high end, others have proposed figures as large as 10 million. The truth is probably somewhere in between, but the range of uncertainty, a factor of 5, gives you a sense of how incomplete our picture is. A related question concerns the maximum size of individual Amazonian settlements. The urban networks documented by LiDAR are impressive, but they are spread across large areas. The individual sites within those networks are rarely large by the standards of other ancient civilizations. The largest Casarabe sites in Bolivia cover perhaps 150 hectares, which is significant but not comparable to the great cities of the Aztec or Inca empires. Some researchers argue that Amazonian urbanism was fundamentally different from Old World urbanism, that the Amazon cities were low-density garden cities in which large populations were spread across extensive agricultural landscapes rather than packed into dense urban cores. Others maintain that we simply haven't found the largest sites yet, and that the very heart of the Amazonian urban system, its equivalent of Tenochtitlan or Cusco, may still be waiting, undiscovered, somewhere in the unscanned depths of the forest. The question of writing remains completely open. No confirmed writing system has been identified from pre-Columbian Amazonian cultures. The geometric designs on ceramics and the patterns of the geoglyphs may have carried symbolic meaning. Some researchers believe they constituted a form of visual communication, but no one has deciphered them. And it is not clear they were intended to be read in the way we read text. The absence of writing, if confirmed, would set Amazonian civilization apart from the other great civilizations of the pre-Columbian Americas. The Maya had a fully developed writing system. The Inca had quipu, a system of knotted cords that recorded numerical data and possibly more. The Amazon appears to have been different. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially in a forest that destroys organic material so aggressively. The question of religion is almost equally opaque. The geoglyphs appear to have had ritual significance, and the elaborate mortuary ceramics of the Marahuara suggest a complex set of beliefs about death and the afterlife. But the specific content of these beliefs, the myths, the cosmologies, the gods, is almost entirely lost. What survives are fragments in the oral traditions of contemporary indigenous communities, but connecting those traditions to the specific archaeological cultures of the distant past is fraught with difficulty. Perhaps the most haunting, unanswered question is what the Amazon would look like today if the demographic catastrophe of the 16th century had not occurred. Would the cities have continued to grow? Would the forest garden economy have continued to expand and intensify? Might we be living in a world in which an Amazonian civilization with 5 centuries more of development was a major force in global history? We can never know. But the fact that we are asking the question, that we have reached the point where we know enough to even frame it properly, is itself a kind of triumph over forgetting. The story of the lost cities of the Amazon is not simply a story about the past. It is, in the most urgent possible sense, a story about the present and about the future. The most immediate lesson concerns what we do with what remains. The Amazon basin is under extraordinary pressure. Deforestation for cattle ranching, soy farming, and mining has destroyed significant portions of the forest, and the rate of destruction has been accelerating in recent years. In 2021, the Amazon experienced its highest rate of deforestation in 15 years. In 2022 and 2023, the situation continued to deteriorate in many areas. When the forest is cleared, the archaeological sites beneath it are exposed to erosion and damage that can destroy them within a few years. This has already happened to many geoglyphs in Acre, the clearing of the forest for farming, while accidentally exposing them to aerial observation for the first time, has also subjected them to the rain and sun that will eventually flatten them. Some sites that were discovered through early aerial photography in the 1970s are already significantly degraded. More fundamentally, the clearing of the Amazon is destroying the descendants of the ancient Amazonian civilization along with its physical remains. Indigenous communities in the Amazon face existential threats from deforestation, illegal mining, and in some cases, direct violence. The knowledge they carry, botanical knowledge, ecological knowledge, the understanding of how to manage the forest sustainably is irreplaceable, and it is disappearing at a rate comparable to the species being lost in the same destruction. The second lesson concerns what the ancient Amazon tells us about sustainable land management. The terra preta system that Amazonian peoples developed over 3 millennia represents one of the most effective methods of sustainable agriculture ever devised. It built fertility into the soil rather than depleting it. It was self-reinforcing. Once established, it tended to maintain and even improve itself over time. It sequestered carbon rather than releasing it. Modern researchers studying terra preta are not just doing archaeology. They are looking for tools that could help address the twin crises of food insecurity and climate change. The biochar technology that produced terra preta is being actively tested in agricultural settings around the world, with promising results. The ancient Amazonians, entirely without intending it, may have left their descendants a gift of enormous practical value. The third lesson is epistemological, a lesson about how we know what we know, and how easily we can be wrong. The conventional wisdom about the Amazon held firm for centuries. Generations of respected scholars, working from the available evidence, concluded that the Amazon could not support complex civilization. They were confident, they were expert, and they were comprehensively wrong. They were wrong not because they were stupid or malicious, but because the evidence available to them was the product of a catastrophe they did not fully appreciate. They were looking at a forest that had swallowed a world, and they saw only forest. The lesson here is not that expert consensus is unreliable. Expert consensus, carefully reached and regularly revised, is the best tool we have for understanding reality. The lesson is that expert consensus can fail when the available evidence is systematically incomplete, when a catastrophe or a bias or a gap in technology has removed from view the very evidence that would correct the theory. The LiDAR revolution in Amazonian archaeology is a reminder to ask, always, what the evidence we don't have might be telling us. What are we missing? What has been erased? or hidden, or never searched for? What conventional wisdom of our own time will future generations look back on with the same mixture of sympathy and disbelief with which we now regard the confident assertion that the Amazon was always empty? The fourth lesson is the most humbling. The sheer scale of what we have lost and what we have recovered and what we have not yet found forces a reckoning with the full complexity of human history. The story of civilization, as it has traditionally been told in the Western world, is a story of a handful of locations: Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, China, Mesoamerica, the Andes. These are the sites of the great breakthroughs: writing, cities, organized states, and from them, the story extends outward to the rest of the world. The Amazon does not fit this story cleanly. It developed complex, organized, large-scale civilization, but apparently without writing. It built cities, but cities different in form from the ones in the standard story. It transformed its landscape on a continental scale, but through ecological management rather than monumental stone construction. For a long time, this made it invisible. It did not look like what civilization was supposed to look like. And so the evidence was explained away, the explorers dismissed as fantasists, and the dark earth ignored. The Amazon is teaching us to look harder, to be more careful about our assumptions, to recognize that the map of human civilization is still being drawn, that there are extraordinary things waiting to be found in the ground beneath our feet and the skies above our heads. If only we ask the right questions. Let us end where we began, deep in the Amazon, beneath a canopy that filters the sunlight into green and gold. The jungle is growing over something vast. In the Llanos de Mojos, where the Casarabe cities once stood, the raised fields and causeways are still visible from the air, if you know where to look. Long straight lines through the flat landscape, geometric and deliberate, the ghost of a civilization in the grass. In the forests of Acre, the geoglyphs sit beneath their canopy of managed forest, patient and enormous, their circles and squares waiting for the next survey plane to pass overhead. In the Upper Xingu, the Kwikuro people walk paths that their ancestors carved through the forest, tending the same Brazil nut groves and fishing the same rivers that sustained a complex urban society before the world changed. And in the soil, everywhere in the soil, the black earth endures, still fertile, still present, still feeding people who do not know it was made generation by generation by hands that have been still for 500 years. What do we do with all of this? We are in the early chapters of one of the great archaeological stories of the 21st century. The discoveries of the past 30 years have shattered a consensus that held for 5 centuries. We now know with certainty that the Amazon was home to a sophisticated, populous, and ecologically transformative civilization. We know that this civilization was destroyed not by its own failures, but by contact with a world it did not know existed, and by diseases it had no defenses against. We know that what the first Europeans found, a vast, empty wilderness, was not a natural condition but the aftermath of a catastrophe. What we do not fully know is the shape of what was lost, the full extent of the cities, the precise nature of the political systems, the content of the beliefs. The names of the kings and the architects and the farmers who made the dark earth, these things are gone, mostly, and they will not come back. But they are less gone than they were 30 years ago. And they are becoming less gone every year. There are currently dozens of research projects active across the Amazon basin, using every tool available: LiDAR, ground-penetrating radar, DNA analysis, ceramic typology, ethnoarchaeology, and the oral traditions of surviving indigenous communities to piece together the picture. The funding is inadequate. The urgency is great because the forest is disappearing faster than it can be mapped. But the work continues. In 2023, a team of researchers from the University of Exeter and Brazil's National Institute for Amazonian Research published the results of the largest LiDAR survey ever conducted in the Amazon, covering an area of more than 10,000 square kilometers in the Brazilian state of Mato Grosso. They documented a previously unknown network of settlements, plazas, roads, bridge abutments, ditches spread across the landscape with a density that the team's lead researcher described as astonishing. The settlements dated to between 500 and 1,500 CE. There may be more than 10,000 individual structures in the survey area alone.